The website, Front Office Sports, this week issued a report identifying the previously unidentified corporate officers that are referenced in the Janel Grant sex trafficking lawsuit against WWE, Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis, which had led to a lot of speculation about who these people were and what they knew and when they knew it. Paul Levesque's name was thrown around online as one of the officers referenced without anyone actually having anything to back up that claim. His name was being thrown around for weeks, which is why I never mentioned it here. I think people were trying to will it into existence that he was one of them, but as it turns out, he is not one of them. And the reporters were able to do their own research. They also spoke with at least one source, probably somebody who works for WWE, to come up with the names, and then they got the 4 names confirmed, there are 4 of them, by Janel Grant's attorney, and it's not good. It's not a good look at all for any of the people involved. We'll start with the first 2. This is directly from the Front Office Sports story. WWE President Nick Khan and COO Brad Blum are the men identified as corporate officers number 1 and number 2 in a sex trafficking lawsuit filed in January in federal court in Connecticut. The suit claims that Khan and Blum, whose names have not previously been reported, were instrumental to a scheme in which the plaintiff, a woman named Janel Grant, was employed in a completely undefined role except for the understanding that she remained a sexual slave to be used and trafficked by McMahon within WWE. Unlike McMahon and Laurinaitis, the 2 are not personally accused of sexual misconduct or violence. Rather, the suit claims that they and others facilitated and covered up exploitation in ways that make WWE liable under federal anti-trafficking law. Khan, a deal maker and former CAA executive who earned a reputation as one of the most powerful men in sports media through negotiating billion-dollar deals for clients like the SEC and WWE before joining them in 2020, is now the top person in control of the empire that it took McMahon a lifetime to build. It is interesting how Vince McMahon, it took him decades to build WWE up to what it is today. It took Nick Khan all of 3 years? 3.5 years to take over? He reports to Endeavor president Mark Shapiro and ultimately answers to legendary Hollywood power broker Ari Emanuel, who took over as the chair of WWE's parent company TKO, after McMahon resigned in January following the suit filing. WWE takes Ms. Grant's allegations very seriously and has no tolerance for any physical abuse or unwanted physical contact, a WWE spokesperson said in a statement. Neither Nick Khan nor Brad Blum, prior to the lawsuit being filed, were aware of any allegation by Ms. Grant that she was the victim of abuse or unwanted physical contact, nor does the complaint allege that either had knowledge of such. I think the key word there is unwanted. Unwanted physical contact. So the implication being that they may have had knowledge of there being a relationship of some sort between the 2, but not that there was any sort of abuse or criminal behavior involved. That sounds like their version of events. The story continues. The information about the identities of the corporate officers offers a new lens through which to view Ms. Grant's suit. Most attention is focused on the allegations of extreme sexual violence that the suit makes against McMahon and his associates. It can, though, also be read as a set of claims about how McMahon made the highest-ranking executives in his company complicit in his conduct. Front Office Sports independently identified Khan and Blum, as well as the other 2 anonymous corporate officers to whom the suit refers, by cross-checking the details of the suit against publicly available records like online resumes and corporate filings, as well as information provided by sources familiar with WWE. Corporate officer number 1 is said in the suit, for example, to have maintained a 4th-floor office in the company's former headquarters, which a person who worked there confirmed was true of Nick Khan. Front Office Sports then asked Grant's lawyer, Ann Callis, whether its reporting was accurate. I can confirm that these names are correct, she said. The suit says that McMahon groomed Grant while she was grieving the death of her parents and had her hired into a fake job with the company's legal department in May of 2019. Subsequent to that, it says she was subjected to extreme cruelty and degradation, including McMahon defecating on her during group sex, and he and Laurinaitis raping her in the WWE offices, with the abuse only ending in 2022. This left her, according to the suit, crippled both physically and mentally, including from debilitating symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and suicidal ideation. McMahon presented Blum and Khan to Grant as his key fixers, according to the suit. The first time McMahon met her, it says, in March of 2019, he promised Grant, who had minimal work history, that his office would reach out to arrange a meeting with Blum, who was executive vice president in charge of operations at the time. A week later, the suit says she met with Blum. He hardly asked any questions, and before long, she had been hired into a $75,000 a year job in the legal department. In February of 2020, the suit says McMahon told Grant that Blum had warned him that there was a lot of rumors circulating about the relationship. Immediately after this, she was transferred to another department. Years later, after McMahon and Grant signed a non-disclosure agreement that he negotiated on WWE's behalf without its knowledge, the two had a call that he claimed would be the last conversation they would ever have, during which he named Blum as one of the two people she should call if she ever needed anything. The second of those two people was Khan. According to the suit, in March of 2021, Grant told McMahon that Khan had responded to her by introducing herself in a corridor by telling her that he knew exactly who she was. Later that day, the suit says McMahon told her that he had held a meeting with Khan and Blum and informed them of the nature of their relationship. McMahon told her, the suit says, that the two men had voiced concerns to him and inquired whether Grant could be trusted. A WWE spokesperson denies this conversation ever happened. McMahon told Grant that the two expressed concern but were ultimately supportive. The next day, the suit says Blum told her that she was being transferred to the Talent Relations Department, where she would report to Laurinaitis, with whom McMahon had months before pressured her into group sex at McMahon's condo. She was, going forward, the suit says, expected to sexually service Laurinaitis at his hotel and in his office. The suit alleges that her sexual exploitation continued for another year. It also says that during negotiations over the NDA, Grant included Khan and Blum in a list of people whose roles should be addressed in the agreement due to their knowledge of the relationship, although the suggestion was rejected. The person identified in the suit as Corporate Officer Number 3 is, according to Front Office Sports, McMahon's daughter, longtime WWE executive Stephanie McMahon. She is mentioned once in an ambiguous context. Grant attended meetings of WWE's executive committee, something far above her pay grade, and the appropriateness of which she asked Khan and Blum about. At one of these meetings, the suit says Stephanie McMahon, who is described as knowing of other instances of Vince McMahon engaging in inappropriate sexual conduct, motioned Grant to sit near her. 3 months after the NDA between McMahon and Grant was signed in 2022, Stephanie, then WWE's chief brand officer, announced that she was taking a leave of absence from the company. A month later, the Wall Street Journal reported on a probe by the board of directors into payments made by McMahon involving NDAs with several former female employees and performers. After his subsequent resignation as CEO and chair, she became interim CEO and chair. In early 2023, her father seized control of the board ahead of their eventual merger with the UFC. Under the auspices of Endeavor, she resigned days later. Stephanie did not respond to questions sent via overnight letter to a post office box she is set to control and through a direct message to a social media account that she controls. WWE declined to provide contact information for a lawyer or representative through which Front Office Sports could reach her. And finally here, the person identified as Corporate Officer Number 4, according to Front Office Sports, which Grant's lawyer has confirmed, is Brian Nurse, formerly General Counsel and head of WWE's legal department. According to the suit, on May 9th, 2019, 8 months after he had been hired, he offered Grant a job 3 hours after having called her to discuss a legal role. The next day, the suit says Vince McMahon told her that he had ordered Nurse to offer Grant the job, and then McMahon sexually assaulted her for the first time, putting his hand down her pants without consent. Every time I read one of these stories about this whole situation, I feel like I have to take a shower. And so what we have here is the billionaire head of this company throwing his weight around and putting this woman in positions of power that she had no business being in, and using her to satisfy his depraved sexual desires, we'll put it that way. And so you have the other executives in the company, some of them at least, including his own daughter, clearly aware that something was going on, and they went along with it. Because Vince is all-powerful, and it was his company, and what Vince wants, Vince gets. Right? Nobody knows that more than his own daughter. There is no way that Stephanie McMahon was not aware years ago that her father was a fucking predator. There's no way. A predator and a creep. Even after the tanning salon incident years ago, she was said to be furious, absolutely livid about the whole thing. The day the cop showed up to question him about that incident. Because there was a writers' meeting going on that day. This is a story Chris DeJoseph has told. He was writing for WWE at the time, and they had all the writers down there at his condo, whatever it is, down there in Boca. And Stephanie was there, I think, and they were having this meeting to plan out, I think, the next year of storylines, and maybe half the meeting they got through before the cop showed up to question him about the tanning salon incident. And then the meeting was abruptly adjourned, and that was the end of the creative meeting, but she was furious about it. These are things that she was well aware of. She knows who her father is. And yet she still went out there. Whether it was at her father's request or not, I don't care. She went out there on SmackDown after the first story came out in the Wall Street Journal about the NDAs and the hush money payments. She went out there to lead the crowd in chants of "Thank you, Vince." Which in the history of segments that we can look back on and say, boy, that didn't age well, is pretty fucking high up on the list. You know, when Vince forced his way back into the company, Stephanie bolted. She has not been back since. Because she knew. She knew the baggage that her father brought with him. She knew what he really was, and she did not want to have anything to do with it. She didn't want to work with him anymore. I honestly wonder how much contact she even allows him to have with his grandchildren at this point. Would you allow someone like that to be around your kids? She knows what he is. He's a monster. Now, there was no mention of Triple H in any of this, but he is married to Stephanie. He is married into that family. Is it possible that he had no knowledge of any of this or of who this woman was? Yes, it's possible. Do I personally believe that he had no knowledge of Vince cavorting around with female employees? No, I don't. And if his wife knew, then it's pretty likely that he knew too. That doesn't mean he knew about the abuse that was allegedly going on with him and Janel Grant. Same with Stephanie. I don't know that Stephanie knew some of this depraved shit that was going on. But he knows who Vince is too. Triple H does. He's been around this man long enough to know exactly what he is. And there is a reason why, when the board of directors unanimously rejected the idea of Vince McMahon returning to the company, that was in late 2022, he was one of those voices that said no. He and his wife, both, the man's own daughter and son-in-law, were on the board and they said no. You know who else was on the board? Nick Khan. They were all on the board when they voted unanimously to reject the idea of Vince coming back because they knew how damaging it could be to the company. And then when he made moves to force his way back in anyway, they all voted in favor of him, and that's when Stephanie walked away. That was very telling. So that's where things stand right now. I know this sort of thing happens at other companies where you'll have the CEO or the top executive sleeping around with people that work for them. There's a reason why many of these companies have a code of conduct that prohibits this sort of thing. And in a lot of cases, it's rules for thee but not for me. They can do it, but if it was anybody else, right, they would be gone. WWE has a history of deplorable people working for them, going back decades. If you want to get into the Ring Boy scandal and the countless other horrible stories, this company has been dirty for decades. It was just part of the culture there. And it all started with one man. And now that man is on the outside looking in. He still has his 8% ownership stake, but he's on the outside looking in, and from Endeavor's point of view, he no longer works there. You heard Mark Shapiro last week when he was asked about Vince McMahon. He no longer comes into the office. He no longer is employed in this company. He will never again be employed by this company. And that's it. And that's their point of view. We may never know exactly what all of these people knew and when they knew it, not unless they come out and admit it. And maybe they'll have to, under oath at some point. But it makes them all look complicit in what is alleged to have gone on here, whether they were aware of all the gory details or not about what was going on behind closed doors. They have to live with that. They played a part in that, at least a small role in covering up what was going on. The question is, had they known exactly what was happening to this woman, would they still have stayed silent for the sake of their jobs and for the sake of the company, or would someone have had the spine to actually speak up? Maybe I don't want to know the answer to that question.